The road stretched ahead under a soft orange sky as Maya Reynolds drove quietly through the small country highway. She had been driving for hours alone, thinking about how long it had been since she last visited her mother. The air outside looked calm, and the world seemed to move slowly. Her favorite old songs played in the car, and the rhythm helped her stay awake. Maya was a calm and patient woman, always careful, always polite. She worked hard for years in her job, but most people who met her outside of work would never guess who she really was. She didn't like showing off or talking about her position. To anyone else, she looked like a normal woman in her early 30s who liked quiet drives and coffee. After a long stretch of trees and empty fields, she spotted a small gas station up ahead. It looked a little old but had a cozy look to it, one of those places that seemed frozen in time. The sign above the station was faded, and a single bulb blinked at the corner of the roof. Maya decided to stop for gas and maybe stretch her legs a bit. She pulled her car beside the pump, turned off the engine, and stepped out. The warm evening air brushed against her face. She looked around. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a pickup truck parked near the side and an old police cruiser sitting under a tree. The gas station door creaked each time someone went in or out, and the faint smell of coffee and dust filled the air. As Maya started to pump gas, she noticed the police car. Inside, a man was sitting behind the wheel, wearing dark sunglasses even though the sun was almost gone. His window was rolled halfway down, and it seemed like he was watching her. At first, Maya didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just keeping an eye on things. That was his job after all. But after a minute or two, she could still feel his eyes on her. The feeling made her uneasy. She glanced at him briefly, then looked away, pretending to focus on her phone. When her tank was full, she placed the nozzle back and walked toward the store to pay. Inside, the station was quiet. A small fan buzzed from a corner. Shelves were lined with snacks and cold drinks. Behind the counter stood a young man, probably in his 20s, with a friendly smile. "Evening," he said. "Evening," Maya replied softly, setting her card on the counter. "Just the gas, please." He nodded and began typing on the old register. Maya picked up a bottle of water and a pack of mints. Everything felt normal again. She liked how peaceful it was. Just a small-town store with a calm rhythm. Then the front door opened and the sound of boots echoed against the floor. The police officer from outside had come in. The air changed almost instantly. The clerk's smile faded a little, and Maya could sense his quiet tension. She didn't turn immediately but could feel the officer's presence close behind. He walked slowly, his shoes heavy against the floor, before stopping near the counter. "Evening," he said, his voice deep and sharp. The clerk nodded nervously. "Evening, officer." The man didn't respond right away. His gaze shifted to Maya. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. Maya turned to face him. His face was rough, his tone direct. "Just passing through," she said politely. He looked her up and down, then glanced toward the parking lot where her car sat. "That's a nice ride out there. Doesn't really fit this side of town," he said, almost like a challenge. Maya smiled faintly. "I like long drives." Needed to fill up before getting back on the road. He tilted his head slightly. Long drives can be risky, especially for someone traveling alone. His tone was casual, but his stare was not. The clerk quietly handed Maya her receipt. She thanked him, picked up her water, and turned toward the door, hoping to leave before things got awkward. But the officer stepped aside, blocking her path slightly. "Where are you headed?" he asked. Maya paused. "Just visiting family," she said, keeping her voice calm. He nodded slowly but didn't move. "Mind if I see your ID?" The question caught her off guard. "Is something wrong, officer?" He shrugged. "Just routine. Folks driving through here, we like to make sure everyone's safe." Maya hesitated for a moment, then reached into her purse. She didn't want trouble. She handed over her driver's license. The officer took it, looked at it for a while, then looked back at her. "Reynolds," he read aloud. "You from the city?" "Yes," she said. "Just outside of it." He nodded again, still studying her license like it was some kind of puzzle. "You in some kind of government job or something?" "Something like that," Maya replied simply. He gave a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, we don't get many visitors from the city who drive cars like that. You sure you're not lost?" "No, I'm fine," Maya said softly. "Just tired." He stared at her a moment longer, then finally handed the license back. "You be careful out there. Things around here can get unpredictable." Maya nodded, offering a polite smile before stepping outside. The evening air felt different now, thicker somehow. She walked back to her car, feeling his eyes still following her. She took a deep breath before unlocking the door and getting in. Before she could start the engine, she saw the reflection of his patrol lights in her mirror. He was still sitting near the store, his car pointed directly at hers. She waited a few moments, hoping he would lose interest. Inside the gas station, the young clerk peeked out the window, watching the scene unfold. He didn't know who Maya really was, but he could tell she wasn't just some random traveler. There was something calm and confident about her, something quiet but strong. After a few minutes, Maya started the car and slowly pulled out of the gas station. As she passed by the police car, she nodded politely through her window. The officer gave a stiff nod back, still watching. Once she was back on the road, she exhaled deeply. The sky had turned darker now, with streaks of red and purple stretching across the horizon. The road was empty again, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the officer's stare would follow her for miles. She reached for her phone and glanced at a notification. It was a message from her colleague asking if she'd made it out of town safely. She typed a quick reply, all good. Just stopped for gas. Be home soon. Her fingers paused for a second before she hit send. She didn't mention the officer. There was no need, not yet. She had dealt with worse situations before. Still, something about that encounter didn't sit right with her. As the car rolled along the quiet highway, she tried to focus on the road. Trees lined both sides, their branches moving gently in the wind. The faint glow of her headlights stretched ahead like a tunnel of light. But even as she tried to push the moment away, part of her mind stayed alert. She had been in law enforcement long enough to know when someone's behavior wasn't just casual talk. That officer's questions had a different edge to them. It wasn't curiosity, it was control. He had wanted her to feel small, uncertain. But she wasn't that kind of person. A few miles later, she saw the flashing lights again in her rearview mirror. For a second, her heart jumped. But the car passed in the opposite direction. Just another patrol car, maybe. Still, she couldn't help but notice how tense her hands had become on the steering wheel. The night settled in quietly. Maya turned off the radio and drove in silence for a while. Her thoughts moved between the past and present. Her long years of service, the things she had seen, the things she had endured without anyone knowing. People often mistook her calmness for fragility, but she had spent her career standing firm against far more dangerous things than words. The gas station lights were far behind her now, fading into the distance. She didn't look back. Whatever had started there was over, or so she thought. For now, all she wanted was to reach home, see her mother, and rest. She smiled faintly to herself, trying to let the peace of the open road return. But deep inside, a quiet thought lingered. Sometimes fate introduces trouble when we least expect it, and that night, trouble had just begun to notice her. The road was quiet after Maya left the gas station, but her mind wasn't. The whole encounter stayed in her head like a faint echo. She tried to push it away, reminding herself that not every strange moment turned into something serious. Still, the way that officer had looked at her didn't sit right. It wasn't curiosity. It was something else. She took a deep breath and turned up the car's air conditioner. The night breeze outside had cooled down, and she could see the stars through the windshield. Her mother's home was still a couple of hours away, and she hoped to make it before midnight. After a few minutes, she saw headlights in her rearview mirror again. At first, it seemed like another car passing by, but the lights didn't fade. They stayed there, following at a steady distance. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. She slowed slightly, and the car behind slowed too. It was the same police cruiser. Maya's heart beat a little faster, but she kept her face calm. She reminded herself to breathe. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just driving home. Maybe he was heading the same way, she thought. Still, she couldn't ignore how close the car was staying behind her. She decided not to react. Instead, she turned on her blinker and took the next right onto a smaller road. For a moment, she hoped he'd keep driving straight. But as she looked in her mirror, the cruiser turned too. The narrow road curved through a few small houses and open fields. The area was quiet, only a few porch lights glowing in the distance. The police car stayed behind her, not too far, not too close, just enough to remind her he was there. Maya's phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen, but she didn't check it. Her focus stayed on the road. She wasn't afraid, but she knew when something wasn't right. She had trained herself to stay calm under pressure. Still, this was supposed to be her quiet evening, not a work situation. After several minutes, the police car finally turned its lights on. Just the red and blue flashes, no siren. Maya sighed softly. There was no point in pretending it wasn't about her now. She slowed the car, pulled over safely near the side of the road, and rolled down her window. The night air was cool and crickets chirped nearby. She watched in the mirror as the officer stepped out. It was the same man from the gas station. He adjusted his belt, walked slowly toward her car, and stopped just behind her window. "Evening again," he said. "Mind if I ask what brings you down this road?" Maya turned to face him. "Just heading to my family's place." "Is there a problem?" He shrugged. "You made a sudden turn back there. Thought maybe you were lost." "I wasn't," she replied calmly. He nodded, looking at her car again. "You said you're from the city, right? Folks around here don't usually see cars like this." "Makes people curious," Maya gave a polite smile. "I understand, but I'm just trying to get home." He studied her for a long second, then leaned slightly toward the window. "You sure you're not here for something else? We've had a few people come around pretending to be travelers. You'd be surprised what goes on at night." Her patience was steady, but she could feel his tone pressing. "I assure you, I'm just driving," she said softly. He looked unconvinced. "Do you mind stepping out for a moment? I just want to make sure everything's good." Maya hesitated. She knew the rule, always stay calm, never escalate. She didn't want to create a scene or make him feel challenged. So she nodded slowly and unbuckled her seatbelt. She stepped out, keeping her hands visible. The air felt colder now. The road was empty except for them, the flashing lights reflecting off her car. He looked at her license again and walked around the car, pretending to inspect it. "You travel often?" he asked. "Yes, for work," she replied. "What kind of work?" She smiled faintly. "Government work," that made him pause. "Government, huh?" She nodded. "Yes, I move around a lot." He looked at her for a few seconds, maybe trying to figure her out. "You one of those inspectors or something?" he asked with a half-laugh. "Something like that," she answered gently. He chuckled under his breath but didn't seem convinced. "Well, I guess we all have our jobs. Mine's keeping this town safe. Sometimes people pass through who don't belong, you know." "I understand," Maya said calmly. He looked at her again, then down at the road. "Well, just be careful. Nights around here can surprise you." "Thank you, officer," she replied. After a few seconds of silence, he nodded and walked back to his car. Maya waited until she saw him get in before she returned to hers. She started the engine and took a deep breath. Her heart was steady again, but her thoughts weren't. She had dealt with officers before in her career, but never like this. Never with one so openly suspicious for no reason. She drove away, watching the mirror for a while. This time he didn't follow. The flashing lights disappeared in the distance. Still, she didn't feel relieved. Something about that man's tone told her this wasn't over. Half an hour later, she stopped at a small roadside diner. It was quiet inside. Only a couple of travelers sitting at the counter. She ordered a cup of coffee and a sandwich, hoping to rest before the final stretch. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed Maya's tired look. "Long night?" she asked. Maya smiled lightly. "You could say that." "Well, coffee helps," the woman said, pouring a fresh cup. "Where are you headed?" "Just home," Maya said. "Visiting family." "That's good," the woman said warmly. "Roads out here can get lonely sometimes." "You take care." "I will." "Thank you." Maya sipped her coffee, enjoying the warmth. She looked out the window and saw nothing but the quiet road and the soft glow of the diner's neon sign. It felt peaceful again, and for the first time since the gas station, she allowed herself to relax. She thought about calling her mother to say she'd be late, but she didn't want to worry her. Instead, she sent a short text. "On my way, just stopped for food." After finishing her meal, she paid the bill and walked back to her car. The night sky was darker now, filled with stars. The town around her was silent, almost too still. She got inside, started the engine, and sat for a moment. Before she could drive away, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her team leader, just checking in. She replied quickly, "All fine, I'll check in tomorrow." Then she turned the phone face down and drove off. The next few miles were smooth. She began humming along to the soft music playing on the radio. Her eyes stayed sharp on the road, but her mind drifted a little, thinking about work, her next project, and how nice it would be to finally rest at home. Then she noticed something in the distance, A familiar flash of red and blue lights parked near the next intersection. Her stomach tightened slightly. It was another police cruiser. As she got closer, her headlights revealed the same car, the same man. He stepped out again, this time standing by his door, watching her drive closer. Maya slowed the car, unsure what he wanted now. As she passed, he raised a hand, signaling her to stop. Maya pulled over once more. She rolled down her window halfway. He walked toward her slower this time, his expression unreadable. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon," he said. Maya looked at him calmly. "I'm just trying to reach home, officer." He leaned slightly closer to her window. "You sure you're not carrying anything? We've had reports lately of people transporting goods at night." "I'm not carrying anything like that," Maya said. "You're welcome to check my registration or run my plate." He paused. "You sound awful confident." She smiled politely. "I try to stay prepared." He stared at her for a long moment, then smirked faintly. "All right then. You drive safe." Maya nodded, waiting until he stepped away before driving off again. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts were sharp. She knew now he wasn't just curious. He was testing her. As she drove away, she spoke softly to herself. "You'll regret pushing this any further." Her tone wasn't angry, it was calm, certain. The night grew darker and her headlights stretched farther down the empty road. The town faded behind her. She didn't know it yet, but that quiet drive had just placed her in the middle of something much bigger than a random stop. Somewhere deep inside, Maya knew this story wasn't finished, and before the night ended, the truth about who she really was and who that officer truly worked for would begin to unfold. Maya drove for another hour, the road quiet and endless ahead of her. The night had grown darker and a thin fog began to rise from the fields on both sides. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was almost midnight. She told herself that once she reached the next town, she would stop for the night instead of pushing through. Her mind, though, couldn't rest. The same officer showing up twice on different roads wasn't just a coincidence. She had worked long enough in law enforcement to know when someone was following a plan. Still, she reminded herself to stay calm. Overreacting wouldn't help. The soft hum of the engine filled the silence as she drove. The highway lights were sparse now, and the road signs passed slowly. Somewhere in the distance, an old train horn echoed faintly through the night. After a few more miles, she saw a small rest stop ahead, just a couple of vending machines, a dim light, and a public phone. She pulled over to stretch her legs and take a quick break. The cool air hit her face as she stepped out. She took a deep breath and looked around. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but she welcomed the stillness. She leaned against her car, sipping from her water bottle, and pulled out her phone. The signal was weak, but one bar was enough for a text. She sent a short message to one of her colleagues, checking in. Everything fine. Just a delay. She stared at the screen for a moment, then locked her phone and slipped it back into her pocket. The truth was, she didn't like involving anyone unless absolutely necessary. She always believed in solving her problems quietly. She was about to get back into the car when she noticed a sound. Faint at first, like gravel crunching under tires. Headlights appeared slowly in the distance, approaching the rest stop. She froze for a second, watching the car draw closer. Her chest tightened when she saw the familiar outline of the police cruiser. For a brief moment, she thought about getting back in her SUV and driving off, but something told her not to. Running would only make things worse. Instead, she stood still, waiting, her posture calm and steady. The cruiser pulled up beside her car. The same officer stepped out, adjusting his belt like before. He gave her a faint smile that didn't feel friendly. "Evening again," he said, his voice low but clear. "Didn't expect to run into you a third time tonight." Maya looked at him without emotion. "I didn't expect it either." He nodded slowly, glancing at her car. "You must be tired. Been on the road a while, huh?" "A few hours," she said simply. "Mind if I ask where you're heading again?" "I already told you earlier," Maya said, her tone even. He gave a short laugh. "Right, family visit. Must be some family if you're driving through the night for it." Maya didn't answer that. She just looked at him quietly. He rubbed his chin, pretending to think. "You know, something's been bothering me. You said you work for the government, right? What kind of government job has someone driving alone through small towns in the middle of the night?" "I didn't say what kind of job," she replied softly. "But it's one that keeps me busy." He smiled faintly. Busy doing what? She tilted her head a little. That depends on who's asking. The air between them grew still. The faint buzzing of the light above the rest stop filled the silence. The officer looked at her, trying to read her expression, but Maya's face was calm and unreadable. Finally, he said, "You know, people around here don't like strangers, especially ones who act like they're hiding something." Maya folded her arms loosely. Maybe they just misunderstand quiet people. He smirked. Or maybe quiet people have secrets. She looked at him for a moment, then said in a steady voice, "Everyone has something they don't talk about. Even you." That made him pause. His smile faded slightly. He looked down at the ground, then back at her. "You're an interesting one," he said slowly. "I can't quite figure you out." "I get that a lot," Maya replied gently. He nodded, then turned slightly, pretending to glance around. "Well, you take care of yourself out here. Roads can be unpredictable. You never know who you'll run into." "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked at her one last time before walking back to his car. The engine roared to life and he drove off into the night. Maya stood still for a few seconds, listening to the sound fade away. Once he was gone, she let out a slow breath. She opened her car door, sat down, and took out her phone again. This time she typed a longer message to her contact. "Need a quick location check on a local officer. Badge number unclear. Will update when I reach safe area." She didn't send it yet. Instead, she saved it as a draft. She knew better than to send sensitive information through weak signals. She'd wait until she reached a secure zone. As she started driving again, she couldn't help but replay his words in her mind. "You never know who you'll run into." It wasn't a simple warning. It felt like a hint, maybe even a threat, but she didn't let that fear grow. Fear was the last thing she allowed herself to feel while working. She drove another 30 minutes, and soon the faint glow of a small motel appeared ahead. A simple sign blinked near the entrance, "Vacancy." The place looked old but clean enough. She decided it was better to rest and continue early in the morning. Inside, the manager, a kind older man with glasses, welcomed her with a polite smile. "Long night?" he asked. "Very," Maya said, smiling faintly. He handed her a key. "Room number 6. Just across the courtyard. Breakfast starts at 7 if you're still around." "Thank you," she said. Once she entered the room, she locked the door and set her bag on the table. The room smelled faintly of pine cleaner. She sat on the edge of the bed, took off her shoes, and let out a slow sigh. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from her colleague, just checking in as usual. She replied, resting for the night. "We'll report in the morning." She turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow from the street lamp outside. But sleep didn't come easily. Her mind replayed every look, every word from that officer. Something about him wasn't random. She had seen that type before. Someone used to getting away with things. Someone who believed his power protected him, but he had no idea who she was. Maya reached into her travel bag and pulled out her small leather ID holder. Inside was her real badge, the one she never showed unless she had to. The words Federal Bureau of Investigation were printed clearly above her photo. She ran her thumb over it for a second, then put it away. She didn't want to use it yet, not until she understood what she was dealing with. The next morning came early. The sound of birds outside woke her. She got ready quickly, grabbed a coffee from the lobby, and stepped outside. The air was fresh and the sun had just started to rise. She checked her phone again, and now the signal was stronger. She opened her saved message, added a few details, and hit send. It didn't take long before she got a reply. "Got it. Local officer named Rick Dalton. Record under review. Call if needed." She read the message twice, memorizing the name. Then she deleted it immediately. She wasn't surprised. She had heard that name before. Years ago, in an internal report about small-town officers suspected of taking bribes. Now it all made sense. His confidence, his tone, the strange following. Maya got into her car and started the engine. She looked at herself briefly in the mirror, her eyes steady. She wasn't angry, just focused. She knew what she had to do next. As she pulled onto the road, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from her team lead. She answered quietly. "Everything okay?" the voice asked. "Yes," she said. "Just gathering details. I'll file a report soon." "Be careful," her colleague said. "If it's the same Dalton, he's been mentioned before. Don't confront him yet." "I won't," Maya said, her tone calm. "Not until I'm sure." She ended the call and placed the phone face down beside her. The morning sun painted the road ahead in warm gold. She felt her calm return. Every step from here on would need to be careful, calculated, and quiet. As she drove through the next town, people were already out opening shops and sweeping sidewalks. Life looked normal here, peaceful. But Maya knew better. Appearances could hide a lot. She took a sip of her coffee and smiled faintly to herself. "All right," she whispered under her breath. "Let's see where this leads." The story of one small-town officer and one determined woman was far from over. And this time, she wouldn't just be the traveler passing through. She was about to uncover the truth that many people had tried to hide. The morning sun climbed slowly into the sky as Maya drove along the open road. The quiet hum of her SUV and the soft sound of birds made the drive feel peaceful again. But under that calm surface, her mind was focused. The night before had given her enough clues to know that what happened wasn't random. The same officer showing up 3 times meant something deeper was going on. She stopped at a small diner just outside town to grab breakfast and make a few notes. The place looked friendly. Handwritten menu boards, the smell of fresh coffee, and an older man behind the counter humming to an old country tune. Maya found a seat near the window where she could watch the parking lot. She ordered eggs, toast, and coffee, trying to blend in like any normal traveler. As she waited, she opened her small notebook, the one she always carried for field notes. She wrote down the name she'd received that morning, Rick Dalton. She added a few details she remembered: his car number, his route, the gas station location, and the time of each encounter. Each word was written neatly, her mind methodically connecting the dots. When her food arrived, the waitress smiled warmly. "You're passing through?" she asked kindly. "Yes," Maya said, smiling back. "Just taking a break before getting back on the road." "Well, you picked a good day for it." "Weather's nice, roads are clear," the woman said. Maya nodded. "That's good to hear." She ate slowly, taking small sips of coffee, and listened quietly to the conversations around her. Most of them were about simple things: farming, church events, and the local fair. It reminded her that in towns like this, people usually knew each other well. It also meant that outsiders stood out easily. When she finished her meal, she paid the bill and thanked the waitress. As she stepped outside, the air felt crisp and clear. She glanced at the small post office across the street. She decided to stop there next. It was the perfect place to use a secure communication line. Inside the post office, she used a public computer to send a coded message through a government channel. It wasn't a full report, just a request for more background on Officer Dalton's station. Once the message was sent, she closed the browser and cleared the history. Outside, a breeze blew across the street, carrying the smell of cut grass. She walked back to her car, feeling more centered now. Everything she needed to do would take patience. She couldn't rush. After a few minutes, her phone buzzed. It was a response from her contact. Dalton's department flagged 2 years ago. Complaints, intimidation, off-record stops, missing evidence. Case closed early without action. Maya read the message twice, her face calm but her thoughts sharper than ever. She had suspected something like this. Small towns often hid big problems, and sometimes local power went unchecked. She started the engine and drove toward the center of town. Her plan wasn't to confront anyone yet. First, she needed to observe. She wanted to understand what kind of influence Dalton held here. The town was small, quiet, and old-fashioned. She passed a grocery store, a hardware shop, and a few cafes. She noticed that people waved at each other and greeted the police car that drove by. But she also noticed something else. When Dalton's car appeared, some people stopped waving and simply stepped aside. Their smiles faded slightly, replaced with polite silence. Maya watched carefully. She parked near the town library and sat quietly for a few minutes. Her instincts told her that people respected him publicly, but feared him privately. That kind of fear didn't come without reason. She stepped out of the car and went into the library. The librarian, a gentle-looking woman with glasses, greeted her. "Good morning," Maya said kindly. "I'm just looking for some local records." "Old newspaper files, maybe?" "Of course," the woman said. "We have archives in the back." "You can take a look. What are you researching?" "Just a bit of local history," Maya said with a friendly smile. She spent an hour flipping through papers and old digital articles. Most stories were simple: community events, small crimes, local meetings. But occasionally she found small mentions of police activity that seemed to disappear without follow-up. Arrests made, cases dropped, complaints filed, and then silenced. She took quiet notes, all while keeping her expression calm and casual. As she packed up to leave, the librarian asked, "Did you find what you were looking for?" "Yes," Maya said softly. "More than I expected." Outside, the afternoon sun was bright, and she decided to stop at a cafe for lunch. The cafe was small but cozy, filled with people chatting over sandwiches and coffee. She ordered tea and found a corner seat. She was just beginning to relax when she noticed a familiar figure outside, Officer Dalton's patrol car passing slowly along the street. He didn't stop this time. He just looked in her direction as he drove by. Maya didn't flinch or turn away. She simply watched until his car disappeared around the corner. She knew now that he was aware she was still in town, and he was keeping track of her movements. Later that day, she drove to a quiet park outside the town limits. She parked near a picnic area, opened her laptop, and connected through a secure network. She typed a detailed report about what she had seen and attached the notes she'd taken. She wasn't accusing anyone yet, just collecting patterns. When she finished, she leaned back in her seat, letting the gentle sound of the wind calm her. She closed her eyes for a few minutes, resting her mind. Her phone buzzed again with another message. It was her supervisor. "You're doing good work. Stay low. We'll have backup on standby if needed." She smiled slightly at the message. She didn't want backup yet. This was still her mission, and she wanted to see how deep things ran before alerting anyone. The sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and pink. Maya drove back into town, passing the same gas station from 2 nights earlier. The flickering light above the door was still broken. The same clerk was behind the counter, his expression tired but kind. She stopped to fill her tank again, and the young man recognized her. "Hey," he said quietly. "You're still around?" "Just a few more hours," she said. "Then I'll be heading out." He nodded, looking around before lowering his voice slightly. "You should be careful driving at night. Some officers here don't like strangers." Maya met his eyes. "You mean one in particular?" He hesitated, then nodded faintly. "Yeah, best to keep moving." "Thanks," Maya said softly. As she paid, she asked casually, "Has he been on the force long?" "Too long," the clerk said under his breath. "People don't say much, but everyone knows he's different." Maya thanked him again and left. But those words stayed with her. Different. In her world, that usually meant dangerous, or at least corrupt. She drove out of town that night and stopped on a quiet overlook just beyond the hills. The stars above were bright, and the air smelled of pine trees. She sat in silence for a few minutes, thinking about the path ahead. Her mission was no longer just about one officer's attitude. It was about something deeper, a pattern of abuse hidden under small-town respect. She knew what she had to do next. Tomorrow, she would quietly request local cooperation for an internal audit. She'd reach out to the sheriff's office under her cover identity, asking to review patrol records. From there, she could start uncovering the paper trail, but for now, she allowed herself a small moment of peace. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and listened to the sound of the night wind. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of the town lights. Small, fragile, and unaware of what was coming, Maya whispered to herself, "Let's bring some truth into that light." She started the car, heading toward the motel where she'd left her things. She didn't see the shadowed car parked a few 100 feet away, watching her as she drove off. But that didn't matter. Maya was no longer running or hiding. She was moving with purpose. The night ahead was quiet again, but this time it carried a new kind of stillness, the kind that comes right before change. The next morning came with soft light spilling through the window blinds. Maya woke up early, still feeling the calm of the night before, but her thoughts were sharp and clear. Today was the day she would begin her quiet investigation. She knew it had to be done carefully. One wrong move could alert the wrong person. She brewed a small cup of coffee in her motel room, sitting by the table as she reviewed her notes from the past few days. Everything pointed toward one name, Officer Dalton. He wasn't just a man with bad manners or arrogance. He was part of something larger. His confidence came from knowing people feared him. That kind of fear doesn't last long unless someone higher up allows it. After finishing her coffee, Maya dressed in plain clothes, jeans, a light jacket, and sunglasses. She packed her laptop and notebook, then drove toward the sheriff's office. The building sat near the center of town, small but well-kept with a flag fluttering outside. She parked across the street and watched for a few minutes. Officers went in and out, some greeting each other warmly, others silent and hurried. When she finally stepped inside, she was calm and polite. The receptionist looked up from her desk. "Good morning. Can I help you?" the woman asked. "Yes," Maya said with a gentle smile. "I'm working with a regional review team. We're updating routine patrol data for community reports. I just need to check some records." The receptionist blinked, then nodded uncertainly. "Sure, I can ask the deputy in charge of reports. Do you have a name or department code?" Maya handed over a small identification badge, not her FBI credentials, but a cover ID for interagency auditing work. It was official enough to get her access without raising alarms. After a few minutes, a middle-aged deputy came out. He was friendly-looking, with calm eyes and a relaxed walk. "You're here about the patrol logs?" he asked. "That's right," Maya said. "It shouldn't take long. Just a few months of records." He led her to a small office where several filing cabinets lined the walls. "Everything's paper here," he said with a small laugh. "We're not too modern yet." "That's fine," Maya replied. "Sometimes paper holds more truth than digital files." He smiled, not realizing the deeper meaning behind her words. As he left her alone with the records, Maya opened the first cabinet labeled Patrol Shifts. She began scanning through the logs quietly, her eyes moving quickly. The handwriting changed often, some neat, some rushed, but certain signatures appeared repeatedly. Dalton's name showed up far more often than others. Sometimes on days he shouldn't have been working. Sometimes in areas far outside his assigned zone. She took quiet photos with her phone for later review. A few entries caught her eye, mentions of special watch or private rounds. There were no official notes explaining what those terms meant. It looked like code language for off-the-books work. After 2 hours, Maya packed up the files neatly. As she returned them, the deputy asked, "Find everything you needed?" "Yes, thank you," she said warmly. "Your system's very organized," he chuckled. "Glad to hear it." "We try our best," she smiled and left. Once outside, she walked a few blocks away before pulling out her phone to send a message through her encrypted channel. Found irregular patterns. Need state payroll verification for Dalton and 2 other names attached to same shifts. Within minutes, a reply came. On it. Expect confirmation by evening. Maya tucked the phone away and walked into a nearby cafe to wait. The place was quiet, filled with morning sunlight and the smell of fresh pastries. She ordered tea and sat near the window. From there, she could see the sheriff's office down the street. As she sipped her tea, she noticed Dalton's patrol car pull up outside the building. He stepped out, laughing with another officer, acting as if he owned the place. His manner was loud and confident. People looked at him, smiled politely, and then quickly looked away. It was a pattern Maya had seen too many times. Forced respect built on fear. Dalton's eyes scanned the street casually, and for a moment they met hers through the cafe window. She didn't flinch or look away. She simply took another sip of her tea. After a few seconds, he turned and walked inside. The afternoon passed slowly. Around 4 o'clock, Maya's phone buzzed again. The message was short but powerful. Dalton received unexplained payments under Community Support Fund, traced to local businesses. Possible extortion link. She leaned back in her chair, letting out a quiet sigh. It confirmed what she had suspected from the start. The so-called protection money people mentioned wasn't just rumor. It was real and documented. Now she had enough to justify a deeper look. But she still needed local voices. She couldn't rely only on files and data. She needed someone from the town who would speak honestly. That evening, she drove back to the gas station. The same young clerk was working. The sky was turning orange as the sun dipped behind the trees. "Back again," the clerk said with a faint smile. "Just passing through," Maya replied. "Mind if I ask you something off record?" The clerk hesitated. "Depends what it's about." "You said last time that some officers make people uncomfortable," she said softly. "Was that about Dalton?" The young man looked around nervously, then nodded. "Yeah, everybody knows him. Some business owners have to pay small fees. They call it protection, but it's not. It's just what you do if you don't want trouble." Maya's expression stayed calm. "How long has this been happening?" "A while," he whispered. "My uncle runs a repair shop. He pays every month. If he doesn't, his shop gets checked every week for violations." She listened quietly. Has anyone ever reported it? He shook his head quickly. No, people tried once, but the reports just disappeared. You can't win against him. He's got friends higher up. Thank you, she said kindly. That's all I needed. Before leaving, she bought a bottle of water and left a generous tip. The young man gave her a nervous but grateful smile. That night, back at her motel, she began to piece everything together. The illegal payments, the altered patrol logs, the missing reports, it all formed a pattern. It wasn't just one officer being corrupt. It was a system built around silence. She opened her laptop and typed up a formal internal memo under her FBI credentials. This time, she didn't hide behind her cover. She submitted the report directly to her division head. The memo included all evidence she'd gathered so far, and a request for an official field operation. After sending it, she sat quietly, staring at the screen. She knew that once the report reached Washington, things would move fast. Outside, the night was calm again. Crickets sang softly, and the distant sound of cars hummed along the highway. She turned off her lights and sat by the window, watching the quiet town below. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. It was her supervisor. Good work, Maya. Operation approved. Keep observing. Support team en route in 24 hours. Stay subtle until we arrive. She smiled faintly. It was the sign she'd been waiting for. The next morning, Maya walked through town again, blending in easily with the locals. She stopped at a bakery, chatted with a few people, and listened carefully. The stories were similar. Small fears, quiet compliance, unspoken frustration. Each word from the townspeople became another piece of the puzzle. Each nervous glance told her how much they wanted change, even if they didn't believe it was possible. By late afternoon, she knew the town's layout by heart. She knew who owned which shop, who paid, and who dared to resist. She also knew that Dalton's sense of control came from believing no one was watching. That belief was about to be broken. That evening, as the sky turned deep blue, she sat in her car near the main square. She saw Dalton's patrol car again, parked in front of the grocery store. He was talking to two men outside. They laughed, but she could see the tension in their faces. They weren't laughing because they wanted to. They were laughing because they felt they had to. Maya took quiet video evidence from a distance. She didn't need confrontation yet. All she needed was proof of pattern and intent. When Dalton drove off, she waited a few minutes before sending another coded message. Pattern confirmed. Prepare for public operation. She leaned back in her seat, letting out a slow breath. The hardest part, staying patient, was almost over. Tomorrow, everything would change. She looked out at the dark streets where porch lights glowed softly and families gathered for dinner. She thought of the people she'd met. The clerk, the baker, the librarian, all living quietly under the same shadow. Tomorrow, she whispered to herself, they'll get their peace back. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of the wind ease her thoughts. The night was still, but deep down she could feel it. The calm before the storm of truth. The morning air was cool and light when Maya stepped out of her motel room. The sky was still pale, the town quiet, and the world around her looked calm, almost too calm for what was about to happen. Today was the day everything would come to light. She sipped her coffee while standing by her car, thinking through the plan one more time. The support team from the Bureau was already on their way, working in coordination with state authorities. Everything had to look ordinary until the very last moment. The success of the operation depended on timing and precision. She placed her badge inside her jacket pocket but kept her expression neutral. Outwardly, she was just another traveler finishing her breakfast before heading out. But inside, her thoughts were focused, steady and sharp. As she drove toward town, she noticed how normal everything looked. The streets were quiet, people were opening shops, and children were heading to school. It almost made her heart ache, knowing how much fear had quietly lived behind these smiles. At a small park near the main road, she parked her SUV and waited. From there, she had a clear view of the police station down the street. The plan was simple. When the clock struck 9, the state oversight unit would arrive. She would make contact at the same time, identifying herself officially. At 8:45, her phone buzzed. The message was short. Teams in position. Proceed as planned. She locked her car and began walking toward the sheriff's office. The sound of her footsteps on the sidewalk mixed with the distant chatter of morning life. Each step felt heavy but filled with purpose. When she reached the front desk, the same receptionist looked up and smiled politely. "Good morning." "Back again?" "Yes," Maya said softly. "Just one more follow-up." The woman nodded. "Deputy will be right out." Moments later, Dalton walked out instead. He didn't look surprised to see her. His sunglasses hung from his shirt, and his tone carried that same smug confidence she'd seen before. "Well, look who's still here," he said. "Couldn't get enough of our little town?" Maya's voice stayed calm. "Just finishing up some business," he smirked. "You know, most people who stop by here move along pretty quick. But not you." "That's true," she said. "I don't like leaving things unfinished." Before he could respond, the sound of multiple engines filled the street outside. Several unmarked vehicles pulled up. Officers in suits stepped out, moving quickly and professionally. Dalton's expression shifted in confusion, then disbelief. "What's going on?" he asked sharply, glancing toward the window. Maya looked him directly in the eye. "It's called accountability." She reached into her jacket, pulled out her badge, and placed it on the desk. "Senior Special Agent Maya Reynolds, FBI. You're under federal review for corruption, intimidation, and misuse of authority." The room went silent. The receptionist froze, her eyes wide. A few deputies near the hallway stopped in their tracks, unsure what to do. Dalton blinked, his mouth opening slightly before he managed to speak. "This is some kind of mistake." Maya shook her head calmly. "No mistake. Every file, every payment, every witness, it's all documented." 2 state officers stepped forward and read him his rights. He started to argue, his tone rising, but Maya's steady gaze kept him quiet. There was no shouting, no drama. Just truth unfolding in front of everyone who had once feared him. Outside, a small crowd began to gather as word spread that something big was happening at the sheriff's office. People stood quietly, watching through the glass doors. Some looked uncertain. Others looked relieved. Within minutes, Dalton was escorted outside. For the first time, his confidence was gone. He kept his eyes low, avoiding the faces of the townspeople. Maya stepped out behind him. The bright morning light fell across her face as she spoke softly to the local sheriff, who had just arrived looking surprised and pale. She explained the evidence, the investigation, and the formal charges. The sheriff listened silently, nodding slowly as he realized how deep the situation ran. By noon, the small town that had once lived in quiet fear was buzzing with talk. News vans arrived from nearby cities. Reporters tried to get statements, but Maya kept her words measured. She spoke once, clearly and simply. "Justice isn't about power. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. No one is above the law, and no one should live in fear of those sworn to protect them." Her words echoed through the air, calm and strong. People began to smile again. Not the nervous smiles of fear, but the real ones that come from relief. Later that afternoon, Maya sat on a bench near the town square. The air felt lighter now, like a weight had been lifted from the whole place. She watched as families walked by, some waving gently at her in quiet gratitude. She didn't need their thanks. Just seeing peace return to their faces was enough. A few townspeople approached her. The gas station clerk was one of them. He looked hesitant at first, but then smiled shyly. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I saw the news. I just wanted to say thank you." Maya smiled kindly. "You don't have to thank me. You all helped by speaking the truth," he nodded. "Still, it means something. Things might finally get better now." "They will," she said softly. "But it'll take time. Change always does." He nodded again, then walked away, his shoulders straighter than before. As the sun began to set, the bureau team finished collecting documents and sealed evidence boxes. The sheriff signed cooperation papers and promised a department-wide review. When everything was done, Maya walked back to her car. The streets were quiet again, but this time it was a peaceful quiet, not the kind filled with fear. She paused before opening her door, taking one last look at the small town. The flickering light outside the gas station had finally been replaced with a new one that shone steady and bright. It felt symbolic, a simple light that no longer trembled. Her phone buzzed one last time. It was her supervisor again. "Outstanding work, Maya. Case closed. Return when ready." She smiled faintly, typing back, "Staying one more night. Feels like the town needs the quiet." That evening, she went for a walk down the same main street she had first arrived on. The same shops, the same faces, but everything felt different now. People greeted each other openly. A few even waved at her with genuine warmth. The tension that once hung in the air had finally lifted. She stopped at a small cafe for dinner. The waitress who served her earlier recognized her and smiled. "Feels lighter around here today," she said cheerfully. Maya nodded. "It does. Whatever happened this morning, it was the right thing," the waitress added. People needed that. Maya looked out the window at the quiet street. Sometimes truth just needs a little help finding its voice. After dinner, she walked back toward the park. The stars were beginning to appear in the sky, twinkling faintly above the town. She found a bench under a tree and sat down, listening to the sound of crickets and distant laughter. For a long while, she sat in silence, letting the moment sink in. She thought about how many towns like this existed, places where fear grew quietly, waiting for someone to notice. She knew her work wasn't over. There would always be another case, another truth to uncover. But for now, this chapter was complete. She leaned back and closed her eyes for a few seconds. The cool breeze brushed against her face, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, and that sound made her smile. When she finally opened her eyes, the stars had brightened. She stood up, brushed off her jacket, and walked toward her car. As she drove away, the reflection of the town lights glowed softly in her rearview mirror. It wasn't just a small town anymore. It was a reminder of what courage and truth could do when someone refused to look away. Maya turned on the radio, and gentle music filled the car. She drove quietly through the open road, the world stretching out before her once again. Another journey would come, another story would unfold. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to rest. The stars followed her in the mirror, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. For the people she helped, for the justice she carried, and for the peace that returned to the town, everything was finally right. And as the road curved ahead into the distance, Maya smiled faintly, whispering to herself, one light at a time.